Okay, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm on the line here online, as always, during this pandemic with a couple of guys who haven't been on the show before. Although I heard your music last year. You guys were nice enough to send me a copy of your previous CD, and you have something new that is in the works here. So I definitely want to talk about that. But before we even get started, if you want to introduce yourselves and a little bit about what you do in the band, and we can take it from there.
Okay. My name is Russ Chan. I am the guitarist in Rooftop Static. And basically we are a five-piece unit that gets together once a week, and we enjoy just doing this.
Cool.
Yeah, hey folks, my name is Scott Hinks and I'm the vocalist in Rooftop Static. I've also helped with producing and mixing this particular release of ours, the second release, and yeah,
cool.
That's me.
And so there's three others we're missing. So who's not here today?
Patrick Farr is our bassist. Our drummer, Adrian Kazit, just joined us a couple of years ago, and then our keyboardist, Paula Tinkler, or Kirkland, it is her other last name. I keep on forgetting. She joined us probably a year ago.
Oh, cool. Okay. How long has this actually been a band? I mean, how long have you guys been in some form or another operating?
Yeah, it's a great question. In some form of or another is the key component here. Since 2013. Yeah, so Russ and myself knew each other from a previous project with Patrick. We had a band, I want to say, Russ, going back to around 2008 timeframe, called Answers in Green. It really never got off the ground, Sam. Like it was sort of a year project, and then we all went our separate ways for different reasons that we probably don't want to get into in this conversation. But yeah, since 2013, and since then we've had a number of different lineup changes. We've had drummers that had to move cities. We've had keyboard players that decided to sort of switch out the projects. But I think myself, Russ, and Pat have been, I think, at the center and not the movable parts so far. And we're really happy with the lineup that we have right now.
Cool. So in listening to your stuff, first of all, I like what I hear, which is always good, right? It always helps to be talking to someone whose music I enjoy, of course.
Thank you.
I hate asking this question, and it's a shitty question to answer, but how do you define what it is? Because, I mean, I don't think that it's very, some music is directly something. Like you can get a country singer, it's country music. You can get hip-hop, a rapper, it's hip-hop. You get a punk band, it fits into the punk category. You guys are kind of, I don't know, I'm not sure where to place you. If I have to file you away in like the record store of my head, if someone, hears you're in a band, how do you describe it to them? Because there's a lot going on. I mean, it's not just, there's some straight ahead rock elements, but there's a lot of bounce to it and a lot of like, groovier parts, and especially having the keyboards and things like that. So do you have a label you like to slap on it?
I think we pretty much call it alternative rock with a touch of jazz.
Okay.
So like basically Patrick and I, we go back like over 20 years of playing in multiple bands, and our first project was more of an acoustic folk jazz band called One Day September.
Oh, cool. Okay. So you know Jeff Tatro then?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay. Right on. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. The three of us, we just played, jammed a lot. Jeff Tatro and Patrick influenced me on the jazz aspect, so that was part of my development. So 20 years later-ish, I don't know, 15 years later, Patrick and I have been together in a lot of projects together. So it is kind of like rock meets jazz, and not really the pure jazz, but modern jazz. And then Scott adds a completely different element. And then Adrian, who just joined the project a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, his background is completely different from all of us. He listens to music I've never heard of, and he's really in the mathematical rock alternative stuff.
Okay.
And then with our keyboardist, Paula, basically, she's a music teacher. So she's been classically trained, music degree and everything like that. So she brings a completely different element altogether.
Cool.
So I really don't know what is the way to describe us. I don't know, Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I think, Sam, your question's a good question. Russ hit it on the head. When we write bios, and bios are only sort of an introduction or trying to get, a good description of what the band is and what they've accomplished,
Yep.
and why you should pay attention in one page, right? So
Yeah, I've written a lot of them. Yeah, I know how it goes. Yeah.
yeah. And so we tend to sort of land on that alternative rock, jazz. At times I think you use the term groove.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll throw that in there as well, because certainly there's quite a bit of material that borders on funk.
For sure. Yeah.
We've done some interesting covers from the 60s and 70s that I would almost say we've got a song on the previous album called By the Time. It's almost like Temptations sort of sounding in a way. So we're all over the map. We try not to constrain ourselves, and we just let the product be the product. But you're right. And it's very difficult to describe. And certainly from our perspective, we're not able to really figure out how to describe it in the Winnipeg context, right? Where there's really, in some ways, buckets of genres that are really clearly defined.
Well, that was kind of my next question is is that a positive or negative for you, that inability to define it? Does that help you or hinder you in terms of, getting shows locally? Because, there are so many sort of very clearly defined scenes within the larger Winnipeg music scene.
Honestly, I don't know what we could fit into. It's not like we could play the Winnipeg Folk Festival, or we're truly the, Winnipeg Jazz Festival.
Right.
But we're in between that. And then we could, fit in a rock concert too. So it kind of stops us at a certain extent, but I mean, Winnipeg is so diverse with their sounds.
It is.
So it's no one's really sounding like each other at all. So definitely I would say our project is like a Winnipeg true band, where we just don't sound like anything on the airwaves right now. It's hard to pinpoint our influences.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think so where we tend to play is we play the Fringe, I think, every year, except obviously this year.
Sure, yeah.
And that tends to be a good gig for us. We've done really well at sort of restaurant lounge areas like the Orbit Room. We've done really well at
cool.
the Shannons of the world, the Pyramids. And we played a number of different outdoor, like, summer here in Winnipeg and Manitoba, it's festival season. So we've applied to many festivals, and I'm trying to think of the name of the place for us, where we ended up playing sort of a community, like it's almost like the Morden Apple on Corn Festival or what have you, right? But in this particular circumstance, the backdrop was really country based.
Okay.
And so we took the stage there, and we probably stuck out like a sore thumb, but we still got we got a lot of positive responses, because I think we're able to weave in components that I think most listeners can resonate to.
Okay.
We tend to throw in a lot of covers that anchor us into something that hopefully a lot of different demographics and age groups will go, I recognize that, and create some connections.
Is that something that you're doing deliberately, or is it just kind of a product of all of the different influences from the band members coming through?
I'll try that one, Russ. I think it's a bit deliberate. And what I mean by that is we tend to cherry pick certain decades. I would say we try to pull from the 80s quite a bit. Maybe it's just the group that we are, and put our own lens in it. Because certainly I wouldn't say that we sound like a synthy 80s product or anything like that. And put our different flavor on it. We pull from the 70s too. We definitely, I think, consciously stay away from, something 1990 and above. And that's sort of what we're trying to do. I think you'll find that, we conceptually think that we're early in our careers, I would say, even though we've been around for 7 years. Okay. And so part of it's name recognition. So we've got it in our heads that if you hear us for the first time, hopefully you'll recognize us as the band that played that excellent, cool rendition of Song X, whatever that is.
Sure.
And plus the original stuff was awesome too.
Okay. No, that's what you want, right? You want something to draw people in, especially when you have that difficulty of pinning down what it is you do exactly, right? So yeah, that makes complete sense. So one thing that when I first heard the previous album, one thing that really drew me to it was the keyboard playing. And it's not that there aren't bands with keyboard in Winnipeg, because there are plenty of them, but I don't know what it was, and I think it ties into that groove element of it, where for some reason the keyboard seemed like a very driving part of the sound rather than just kind of color. And I don't know if that is, I mean, I know your keyboard player's not here, but has that always been sort of part of the sound, is having a strong like keyboard element to it?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, when I started this project, before it turned into Rooftop Static, I had a vision that I wanted an orchestrated sound. So, like, guitar these days in music is slowly fading away from being in music, and there's more synth, there's more loops, drum machines, everything like
Sure.
that. Um, I've been playing guitar for over 25 years, and I was taught at a very young age. But this is a new stage for me where it's like guitar doesn't need to be the forefront instrument for this project. So my vision, earlier in the day when I was working with Patrick, basically I really wanted an orchestrated sound, and I wanted like really a keyboardist to play with, and I've never done that in my life.
Okay.
This would be my first project that I've ever actually have worked with a couple of keyboardists to get it to this level. So it was really a personal challenge for me to, instead of playing with another guitarist or with a different instrument altogether, it was just like, yeah, I want to hear this layering sound. I also want to hear some lead piano.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the beauty of the first album when we had Liam in the band. Basically Liam was just all over the place. Like he's an amazing songwriter by himself, but what he added to Rooftop Static, it was just like he just knew the ins and outs of when to come in, and other times he was the background. So he was
Sure.
such a great addition to the project at the time, and he really opened up my eyes to the songwriting that we do now.
Okay. Yeah, I think that when you mentioned the lead piano, I think that that's something that is what made it stand out, is the fact that it wasn't just background. Because a lot of the time you have a piano player in a band, a keyboard player, and they're really just hitting the same chords as the guitarist, and it's definitely adding to the sound and boosting things a bit, but it's not. It kind of blends in, right? But yeah, your sound, it definitely is it's a standard instrument, which is cool. The way it's being used anyway. So that's awesome. So what can you tell me about the new record? I mean, obviously, things have it's been a couple of years since the last one, I imagine. When was the last one recorded?
We released it in 2017.
Okay, so you're 3 years on now.
Yeah.
What has changed about your sound, aside from lineup changes, because that obviously is going to make an impact in
Sure.
some way or another, but how do you think the sound has progressed between the two records?
Yeah. So let's start with the lineup change, because
Sure.
I think that's actually important to cover off. So when we started writing this new record, I think it's safe to say we were going through some of the lineup changes that even got us to this version of the band.
Okay.
And we started to find that we were gravitating to, I'll call it more of a rock feel, partially because we didn't have, someone sitting in the chair of that keyboard role that you just talked about previously,
Sure.
where Liam played. And we ended up getting Adrian, and Adrian's style for drumming was one that he just bust out some beats, just some crazy wicked beats. And so what ended up happening was a lot of our tunes ended up being rallied around those drum beats, so
Okay.
more of a rhythmic flavor. So I think a lot of the songs that you're hearing on this record, we still maintain our groove feel. We still maintain our funk feel. We've got, I think, at times more of a deliberate sort of rockier sound at times, more intricate arrangements than we tried, I think, previous.
Okay.
We still hold on to, I think, some of the softer elements where, there was a couple songs, I wouldn't call them ballads so much on the first record, but, slower songs, there's a couple of those on the record, but a little bit more of a progression towards intricacy, I would say. That was driven out of some of the drum pieces. And then when Paula comes on board, one of the things that we got with her is, while Liam was a very accomplished keyboard player and background vocalist, like, Paula brings that female vocal to the table, which, really, I find my voice and her voice complement each other quite well on the record. And so there's a lot of different things that we tried out, I think, vocally that we didn't on the first album. So I think about times, and I'll turn it to Russ for a second. it's more rockier. I think it's at times it has more dynamicism than the previous record.
Sure.
I'm not going to describe it as, a opus type of thing, like 12-minute songs or anything like that, but the ups and downs are a little bit more dynamic, whereas the first record was a little bit more flat and straightforward.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree with what Scott said there. I think we're a little bit more rock focused on this album than the first album. I think on the first album you can really hear the alternative jazz, and with this lineup, when Adrian joined the band, like again, as Scott said, like Adrian came up with some wicked drum beats that I've never heard before, and it was actually the first time I actually have written to a drummer instead of me presenting a bunch of chords. So like Adrian, Pat, and I, we would just jam, but Adrian would just come up with these weird drum beats, kind of from his mathematical influence and listening to different like alternative rock that I haven't listened to. And all of a sudden he starts playing it, and it's like, oh, what could I do to write something on top of that?
Right.
I try to keep it as simple as possible, but like prior to Adrian joining this band, we used to be a 6-piece, and we used to have a percussionist in the band.
Okay.
So really, like the direction that we were going to from the first album to the second album, basically Adrian became that, big box of like, hey, I can play drums, I can do different rhythmic ways of hitting percussion stuff, and he just really filled up the sound. So I think this album personally is a bit more, as Scott would say, it's dynamic, it has a punch to it, it has a female vocalist touch to it too. You can hear a little classical in Paula's playing too, the way she approaches it. So it's definitely more of I think, together on this album versus the first album. First album, we were just trying to figure out our sound, and this one's a little bit more definitive.
How has the pandemic affected you guys? Because, obviously it's affecting everyone, regardless of whether they're musicians or not. But, over the course of the past 6 months or so, doing these online rather than in person like I used to do, I'm hearing kind of like a wide range of effects this has had on bands. And like, you guys have new music coming out, and it's the middle of a pandemic. How has that sort of affected your plans or your, what you wanted to do with this record in terms of, releasing it or playing shows to support it and things like that?
Yeah, I'll try that one. It's hard. I'll say it's hard in terms of, so we recorded the record from the middle of December, and it was all mastered by the end of June.
Okay.
And when we started looking, if you kind of anchor back to where were we in June in Winnipeg, everything was open. You can go down to the Forks and get a beer at the Common.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful sort of environment. And I think for a lot of us, it started to feel normal, right? And so mentally, we were starting to talk about, okay, so what does a release look like? What does a CD release look like? Where will we go? Are there limitations on any venues right now in terms of capacity? And at the time there was, but there was sort of, I'll call it hope or optimism that things were going to open up again.
Sure,
and we'd be good to go. So we started reaching out to places like, the West End, the Park, the Pyramid, good fits for us, places that we've all done releases before, and sort of got the lay of the land and where were they at in terms of, what they were doing for their customers and trying to keep social distancing, etc. And then we started rehearsing over summer and started hearing about second wave. And so we're like, well, where's that? What would happen if we had a release in the fall? Fast forward to now, and things are starting to collapse a little again, right? Yep. And we've got, if you're classified, and it depends really on the liquor licenses in Winnipeg too, right?
That's right.
So if you're classified as an entertainment venue versus maybe a nightclub, you're shut down completely. Whereas, some places, depending on their license, are able to have 50% capacity. So not going to lie to you, Sam, it's been a mental challenge for us, because I think Russ, myself, Pat, Adrian, Paula might have been used to what I'll call the traditional way of releasing, which is, we're still planning to do CDs. We still sell a handful of CDs at shows and here and there, and for our CD release. All of our tunes will be available for October 30th as part of digital release. So that's iTunes and Spotify and all the other, streaming channels that you can fill your boots with. But it's just not the same, right? Like, it's just not getting your product, seeing your friends, family, and your fans come out, supporting you, getting the t-shirts done. So it's not to say we're not going to do that, but the timing feels off. And I think we're really struggling to wrap our minds on how to promote it. And we know that many bands, come on your show and talk about their album, and there's other venues where people are doing sort of live recordings and
live streams and stuff.
Yeah, live streams, sure, 100%. And certainly we've talked a little bit about that, and that's something we are kicking the tires at. Not going to lie to you, but it seems challenging. It also, when you put yourself in the shoes of, I think, the consumer. We've talked quite a bit about it, and we often wonder, like, are people caring about music right now? And I want to believe in a world where we do, because for me, music's always been sort of my emotional and mental salvation, right? That's where I go get lost.
Yep.
But for a lot of people, just having a job and making sure you're not sick and taking care of your kids or whatever is the focus. So we're really hoping that we get some good momentum to start off with, but I think you're very familiar with many of your bands that you probably have on here, and you know the music industry well enough. You tend to want to start off with that big push. And so we're trying to figure out what does that big push look like, and how do we keep momentum in this environment? And I don't think we have all the answers.
I don't think there is an answer. I don't think there's one answer to solve that, because I think everyone's trying so many different things, and some are hitting, some are missing. And it's just, it's very strange. It's a weird time to be doing this, for sure. But at least you kind of have a date when you're going to put the digital stuff out. So that gives you kind of a point to look forward to, even if you can't do a traditional CD release show, right?
100%. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear you're still putting out CDs. As someone who refuses to move over to Spotify and all that stuff and still listens to physical media, it's always nice. It's always nice to hear bands are still doing it for the people like me who are actually gonna listen to CDs. So that's cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So if people want to hear more of your stuff, I mean, if they're hearing about you for the first time, maybe on this podcast, what's the best way for them to find out more information? Because it's a podcast, someone could be hearing this 3 months from now, and maybe by then, maybe things will be a bit different. Maybe you guys are actually able to play shows. So, is there like an information hub where they can go to find out show information, or where to download the music and things like that?
Basically, really, it's our Facebook page.
Okay.
Functions as our website, and then it links to everything. So it will show you how to get to iTunes, Spotify, I guess Amazon too, to buy our album. Also SoundCloud if you just want to listen to us. So really, we treat Facebook as our main website and direction, and it'll guide you wherever you need to go on how you want to stream our music.
Cool. That's good. I mean, it's there's so many options, right? I mean, just like there's so many options of what places to stream it, now there's so many ways everyone's got 17 different social media accounts. Sometimes they're not all, enough upkeep on each one of them, but that's good to know. So assuming, I mean, this is a big assumption, but assuming things get back to some semblance of normal in the near future, I'm not convinced it's going to happen, but if it does, what is sort of your plan of attack once we get out of this pandemic? Do you have an idea of how you're going to approach kind of continuing as a band once shows become more available, and once you can actually do the things that you had intended to do?
Yeah, I think we do. I mean, let's just start off with, so in addition to where Russ went regarding the streaming pieces, and to your point, we're planning to have a physical CD. That you'll find that in your local CD stores, which I hope, I imagine, Sam, a lot of your listeners are going to places like Into the Music, Planet of Sound, etc., and going to support local musicians, and certainly we'll have our products there. I think secondly, I'm not going to lie, we're still going to chip away at the music festivals that we haven't got our foot in the door yet. And still rely on the venues that we've got a good base in and home in. So like we mentioned, the Fringe, Shannon's is a big supporter of us. We've been talking to Dave at the Pyramid, the Albert's reopening.
That's right.
And he was trying to get us to come down and take a look at that. And he's like, the renos are awesome. And it's like, just didn't get a chance before everything sort of shut down, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, didn't that happen just as it was shutting down too? Didn't they just renovate it and then this happened again?
it did, yeah. We were going back and forth with them, like literally, I think 2 weeks, and then yeah. So I think our goal would be, you know, clubs, bars. Oh, well, actually, the Cavern's been really good to us too. So shout out to them. We've played there a few times and actually had some of our I think our funnest nights there. I think you're going to find us in those type of venues. We're also looking for one of the things that we're hungry to find is partners and bands that feel like a good sort of matchup to where there's cross pollination between, you know, the draw that they bring out and the draw that we bring out, and
Sure.
and just make it a really great night. So that's something that we've been hungry to sort of partner with. And I think for us, it's sort of the Manitoba Festival circuit in the summer, plus the different bars and venues in Winnipeg. We wouldn't put it past us to think about a, you know, a sort of mini tour. You know, just as much as we do, you're either kind of looking out west and doing a whole bunch of cities there, or maybe down in the Toronto, Windsor, you know, those type of
Yep.
areas, right? So we'll see if our product takes us there. I think in addition to that, we've got a few contacts in some of the film industry here, and hoping maybe we'll land some licensing. We had a song that landed in a film that was locally made here.
Oh, cool.
Off the first album. So you know, hopefully that's something that we can get our music out there as well.
Cool. Yeah, that's a very different avenue that I think a lot of bands are thinking about, but it's definitely an option, right? I mean, especially with Manitoba's film industry continuing to grow and, you know, get more and more prolific. It seems like every week I drive by somewhere and there's a movie truck filming something, even during the pandemic. So yeah, that's probably actually more bands should maybe be thinking about that, or not, but then you guys can, you know, take advantage. But yeah, no. So I'm glad you guys are still going through this. I'm glad you have you know, have the record coming out despite what's going on in the world, and hopefully people will check it out, and hopefully that will translate to people wanting to check you out, you know, once things get back to some form of normalcy. Because I think it's almost like hitting a hard reset on the whole music scene. This situation, because no one has shows, you know, regardless of how successful or how much of a basement band they are. It doesn't make a difference. Like, you know, the big bands aren't playing shows either. So hopefully, I mean, I'm hoping that this will give independent bands maybe a leg up, because everyone's starting from the same level once things sort of come back. But I don't know. It's a mystery.
I agree. I think one of the things that'll be really interesting to see. So we did spend. So COVID started, I guess, officially the end of January, right? So
Yeah.
we were already about a month and a half into recording our album, and most of this was like, we didn't write during this period, but we recorded during this period. I think what will be interesting to see is who is quietly, or maybe not so quietly, recording and developing new music right now.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Not just in Winnipeg, but across the world, and what awesomeness is actually just around the corner when they're ready to release. So that'll be really exciting to see.
For sure. Okay, awesome. What I'm gonna do is